Welcome to Future of Fandom, the podcast where leagues, teams, and federations learn how to turn passive viewers into loyal superfans through gamification, loyalty, and next-gen engagement. Let's build what's next together.
Hi, I'm Miheer Walavalkar, CEO and co-founder of LiveLike, and welcome back to the Future of Fandom. My guest today is someone I've wanted to have this conversation with for a long time. We were first introduced by the legendary David Stern, a man who understood the commercial power of fandom before most people in sport had even started thinking about it. And I think that shared connection tells you something about how Aidan Cooney sees the world. Aidan co-founded Opta, founded Ellipse Data, built InCrowd, created Cortex, and now leads Envision Sport Group, the holding company he has built as the vehicle behind all of it. Across every one of these ventures, he has been working on the same fundamental challenge. How do you build a genuinely unified, intelligent picture of a fan and turn it into something that actually grows your sport? If you want to understand what a genuinely data-intelligent fan ecosystem looks like and why most conversations are still far from it, Aidan Cooney is the person to ask. We're getting into all of it today, the data foundation most organizations are still missing, what AI actually makes possible once that foundation is in place, and why, despite 25 years of progress, there is still so far to go. Aidan Cooney, thank you for having me in your office and being a guest on the Future of Fandom podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Let's get right into it. Obviously, we've known each other for a while now because of originally David Stern, but now we're partners. I'm just listing off all the stuff that you've done because there's a long line. There's Opta, there's InCrowd, there's Cortex, there's Ellipse, which is something I just discovered. You're a man of mystery in our sports world. Over the last 25 years, you've obviously built multiple ventures, but there's always been a single thread, which is building a genuine, unified picture of the fan and how you make it commercially useful. Why do you think the industry has found this so hard to track, and why have you been able to reinvent yourself?
Well, I think the challenge as well as the opportunity is always that you take a view. I'm like you, I'm a product-focused person, which means I'm interested in how people are going to react to a product, and that's what excites me, and how a product solves a problem. But the challenge with that is you're not in control of how long it's going to take for that product to be adopted. Yeah. And you know, the thing that draws us all to sport is probably also the thing that is the biggest challenge to overcome, which is, it often seems so obvious, but it takes a long time for things to change the way that people interact. And so the story, as you say, starts, I sort of worked for an IMG subsidiary in the late 90s, early 2000s, and then set up Opta. And the whole simple plan behind Opta was, in this football, which is the biggest sport in the world, there's actually a very light engagement between the storyteller and the audience. If you would look at the broadcast, there was a sort of scoreline at the top, and occasionally a graphic would come up with, how much territory and possession each team had, which actually was quite difficult to understand. And obviously you'd have goal score information, etc. Whereas over across the pond, American sports were very advanced in telling the story using statistics, and so our simple hypothesis was, if you give fans a higher resolution understanding of what's happening on the pitch, you'll bring them closer to the sport they love. But that's an
20 years ago.
It's an uncomfortable. But thank you for that. There are maybe echoes of. Ultimately, the things that changed it were completely beyond our control. One, the rise of the blogosphere, which then became social. So therefore, sort of amateurs at home doing deeper analysis of what was happening than professionals in the studio. And then sort of chapter 2 is, it's great telling the story and giving people higher resolution information, but there's actually a return path to that, so telling a story and then understanding how the audience reacts to the story is a really important part of creating value. And obviously digital technology enables you to do that. So chapter 2, part of chapter 2 was next gen Opta, which is Ellipse, which you mentioned earlier, and then
which is, I guess, CricViz, TennisViz,
TennisViz, Oval Insights and Rugby, which is a joint venture, and Race IQ, which is also an arrangement with Race Course Media Group. So So yes, that's basically. I mean, if you're taking cricket and tennis as an example, Hawkeye collects all this wonderful data, and Hawkeye and various other businesses in that space. It's high resolution data. It has specific use cases. Our view was there was an opportunity to take that data and turn it into more of a storytelling opportunity. So taking Hawkeye data, which is used for umpires' decisions, and turning it into shots, situations, phases, tactics, etc. That was.
I mean, there's so much power. I mean, storytelling through data done correctly. I don't even remember.
Done correctly.
Done correctly. I mean,
it's the key.
Believe me, I mean, you'll just leave data out on a website and then have some. I mean, that's why Opta Joe was so popular, right? Like they contextualize it for a user.
And that was nothing to do. That wasn't. There's the great Rob Bateman.
That's how I first encountered as a fan. Yeah. I only knew of Opta because of Opta Joe, not because of Opta as the stats company.
But that was, I mean, as far as I was concerned, we were giving free information away on this platform I didn't understand.
Yeah.
So that was and I was young then, so I should have been far more down with it than I was. But Rob Bateman, who was actually really the sort of DNA behind Opta, he's and his team, Duncan Alexander, Matt Furness, David Wall, these guys created Opta really. I just facilitated the sort of growth of it and the sort of plan behind it, but ultimately those are the guys. Opta Joe was genius. Because the following of there's 1 million people following it, but the quality of that follower base was these were journalists, these were producers, Sky equivalents in lots of markets,
commentators and stuff.
It just again that really helped us grow. And no coincidence, the strategy behind Ellipse has been to create consumer brands. So QuickViz is a consumer brand. It's obviously part of Ellipse Data, but no one's heard of Ellipse Data. That's a B2B holding brand. So
interesting. Because having known you for several years now, actually did not know about Ellipse, but I know QuickViz. So.
Well, what tends to happen here is that people like to try and push me into the background as quickly as possible so I don't cause any trouble. And actually, the CEO at Ellipse, who took over 7 years ago, has done all the hard work in building that business. It was really just the genesis of an idea that he's taken and his team has grown into something really special.
So then, I mean, I guess that sort of nicely dovetails into the next one. You already started alluding to it this a little bit before, but Opta was obviously more about intelligence around sporting performance, what's happening on the pitch, but not about how people are engaging it and reacting to it. What did building that business teach you about where the next opportunity really was? I'm going beyond Ellipse at this point. It's more about like the fan side of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of that whole... it's a bumpy ride setting up a business. I mean, when you
well aware
at the end of the story, you're looking back going, God, that was just such a breeze. But it never is. I think it's a bit of the equivalent. I've compared it to childbirth in the past, which obviously I've got no personal experience of. But because you forget the pain and suffering that you go through. But I think the reality is, I understood the barriers to working in sport because there's a very specific, the way that rights work in sport means that, there are barriers that may not exist in other markets that you have to overcome in order to change things. And so I was sort of reticent about going back in sport, but then obviously because you have a deeper domain knowledge, you start to see what could come next. And you get overexcited, you forget the pain and torture, and the genesis of the next plan is there. The hypothesis was the world of sport is still very much a television and in-bowl focused economic model where you've got three fundamental revenue streams: direct fan revenue, which encompasses a few different buckets. You've got
ticketing, commerce, etc.
Exactly. And then you've got media rights revenue, and then you've got sponsorship. And those are three discrete buckets. But obviously sport drives a lot more than that. And if you look at the percentage of advertising dollars, both in television and in social media, that is sport related or live entertainment related, it's very, very disproportionate to the number of hours that is of content delivered. So it's a super premium proposition. But really, the way sponsorship is sold in particular has not evolved since Mark McCormack and Arnold Palmer in business in the 60s. So the opportunity really is to help sports reshape the proposition to where consumers are consuming and brands are shifting their budgets. And that was the sort of the simple high-level hypothesis behind InCrowd. And I think the reality is, as you know, exactly like chapter 1, great vision, but lots of things need to come together in order for your vision to come true. And not all of those things you can control. And there's always a worry that, you have these great ideas and there's no question in my mind that our view of the world will happen. It's just a question of when and whether we're the beneficiaries of these changes.
That's right.
And that's there's only so many things you can influence on that. But yes, so that was the high level vision. And really, even in a post-COVID world in 2026, a lot of things have evolved, and pretty fundamental shifts have evolved.
Yeah.
But we're still in a situation where the proposition of sponsorship is still quite similar. I mean, it has evolved. There are more digital elements to it, but it's still really a linear proposition if you look at the market as a whole. Whilst there has been a shift in fan spend, that shift has not, has definitely not moved as quickly as we would have thought it would have done in 2015, even with the COVID spike. So I feel really that we're still, if you look at this sort of product lifecycle curve, we're still in the footholds of this opportunity, and that's exciting, as well as challenging.
As long as you have the staying power.
Correct. Yeah.
Do you think the aspect about it being a fan proposition was always there, or do you think that clarity came later? No,
I mean, I think that was almost, we had this sort of very ugly Venn diagram with the brand, the fan, and the sport.
Okay.
In our original proposition. So the fan obviously is at the center of that. And, again, if it's the language you're using, it was about that is the next balance sheet item is your fan base. It's going to become the most important balance sheet item, because if you have direct relationships with your fan base and you understand how they react to content, how they react to different stimuli or calls to action, you can then shape the proposition accordingly. So yes, the fan was always at the center of it, but the reality is sometimes in your execution you lose sight of that and you have to recenter back towards it, because ultimately that is the most important thing. And the challenge for our B2B businesses is that when we don't ourselves have direct relationships, so you're working with the intermediary, which is your customer, to help them activate their customer, and that there are links in the chain that a lot of which you don't control. So those are the things. So that the help sometimes means that you lose sight of the core objective, but the core objective is always in our world the fan, because I believe very firmly that the sports are B2B businesses, and ultimately they will become B2C businesses. And that doesn't mean necessarily that they're streaming video direct to sports fans. It means many orders of things that you and I both preoccupy a lot of our time.
And I couldn't agree more. I mean, one of the things that we obviously talk about at LiveLike is there's a lot of data. Organizations actually are sitting on a lot of data, but I don't think that has translated into intelligence just yet. Part of that is because a lot of the data sits in silos. There are disconnected pieces of the architecture. Obviously, you're trying to connect those. We're trying to act on those.
Yeah.
But do you think that's the biggest problem right now, in the sense that disconnected data sets are not integrated into fan-facing products?
Absolutely. You can't activate until you unify. And that's and actually, what does data unification mean? In the world of sport, it's very different to other customer verticals, because the audience type means that you've got different unifying your data to grow your business, which is what ultimately we're in the business of doing, means something completely different. So, in a customer data world, which is very fan revenue focused, you've got a rational customer who is price sensitive, who doesn't necessarily have loyalty to your brand, and you're trying to build loyalty. In the fan, you've already got that out of the box. You've got, ultimately, potentially, if you serve the individual correctly, you've got, a super passionate, very invested,
rather than irrational. Yeah.
And so what you're doing with that customer is very different, and how you drive value from it is very different. So, and the economic model is different, because fundamentally, one is a fan revenue opportunity, and fundamentally in our world, our view is that actually the bigger piece of the pie is brand revenue. So ultimately, what you're doing with that data is different, but it's still at the core about unifying data to drive automation. And obviously what you guys do is to make that data, turn that data into a community, which is ultimately the essence of sport.
What does that look in practice, though? I think that's something that, we've heard about it, we've talked about it, like a unified view of a fan. In practice, what does that look like? And why do a lot of organizations not have it? I understand that's the opportunity for Cortex, but in general, like, what is the missing link in your mind?
Well, I think if you look at the 10 years we've been doing this, the market has moved on a long way in terms of having a look at your audience data, whether it's your ticketing data, which tends to be where you start, because that is the consumer-facing element of sport.
That's where most organizations have actually spent.
Exactly.
And CRM for ticketing.
Ticketing is a really challenging data, challenge, opportunity, but challenge. Obviously, multi-vendors, multi-different ways of getting the data out. And so I guess a lot of work has gone into understanding the opportunity or insight from the data, but that's more of a consulting output.
Yeah.
Whereas, actually, if you're going to do something about it, you need to put your data in a position that you can activate it. And that means bringing all these data sources into a single place, ideally in real time.
Yeah.
And then driving that data. So first of all, capturing the data in real time and driving the data to the right place in order to deliver value, whether it's LiveLike for your customer activation, or your marketing automation, etc. Everything needs to be a unified single source of truth.
You mentioned this actually a few times when we've talked before, but obviously that lends itself to like the difference between, you've said it, there's a difference between a customer data platform and a fan data platform. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, yeah, really, it's the nature of the individual. It's so. A fan wants to belong, is very passionate about either the player or the team that they support. And therefore, the data that you're interested in may be very different from a purely rational, transactional-based data proposition. So, and also that influences how you monetize. So, our view is that our focus is much more on behavioral data. I mean, ticketing data is super important as a basis. Behavioral data, how you react to certain pieces of content, when you react to that content, how it's influenced by the result of the team or the player, whether specific articles or content on specific players activates you more than others. And this then informs, how you then serve that fan going forward. So behavioral data is a much more important part of the mix than pure transactional data. It doesn't negate the importance of transactional data, but it changes the emphasis of what you're doing in unifying the data sources and what data is important. And then the flip side of that is, our whole sort of mantra is we are capturing every fan interaction in order to create valuable trackable assets ultimately. So using the mechanics of digital, you can actually you can measure the performance of those interactions and turn that into a valuable asset from a brand campaign point of view, or indeed an internal marketing campaign for tickets or hospitality. So that's ultimately different type of data in, or different emphasis on the data in, and different economic model on the other side.
So you are essentially, I mean, if we just come down to like nuts and bolts of it, you're collecting more signals than a normal customer data platform might collect, which is more focused on transactional data, whereas here you're focusing more on what we said, the fan is a little bit more irrational, more emotional. You're getting that kind of data in as well.
Experiences, like it's behavioral. It's about how fans react to content and messaging, and therefore driving a revenue model which has had a greater emphasis on brand partnerships than on direct fan spend. Yeah.
Do you think European sport is leaving room on the table in terms of innovating on the fan experience side of things? Do you think there's like some low-hanging fruit that they should be looking into?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think we would agree on this topic wholeheartedly that yes, I mean, the opportunity is massive, and there is we are at the beginning of the product life cycle. I believe that there are opportunities to make very advanced progress quickly. And part of it starts with recognizing the opportunity. Some people frame it as, the number of times I've heard that sponsorship's dead and, and broadcast revenues are going to come off a cliff and, the sensationalism around that.
Yeah.
Why not frame it as, no, audiences are changing and that's a huge opportunity. And it's incremental. And maybe some of it will cannibalize your traditional business, but maybe it won't. And it's definitely an opportunity. Fans are spending the most of their time consuming digitally, whether it's sports content or other content, and brands are investing increasingly in digital channels. So this, if that is a very small part of your overall mix, both in terms of your proposition as well as your income stream, then wow, that's an exciting opportunity. And I don't think anyone disagrees with it. But we're at the beginning of that journey.
So then the two things that came to mind, I mean, obviously innovating on the fan experience side, you talked about rugby. There was a big issue with, I think if I wasn't wrong, ITV putting picture-in-picture ads on a rugby match recently.
For the Six Nations.
For the Six Nations, there was a huge hue and cry. And for me, it's so natural because I've been seeing picture-in-picture ads forever. I actually don't remember what it was like before picture-in-picture ads existed. On the other side, FIFA is introducing a water break, which is clearly a commercialization of sport.
Yes.
But I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on that. This is resistant to change, like the fact that...
it's about the culture again, isn't it? I mean, the Six Nations is an incredible tournament and it holds huge importance to European rugby fans. And indeed, it's a global event. People, going back to hardcore fans, they don't like change. So that again goes back to this.
But the sport needs that. I mean, I don't know if these people appreciate that. Where it's struggling. The economics aren't as good as they should be.
Yeah.
There are multiple rugby clubs that have declared bankruptcy. What's the harm in having an ad that actually helps the media rights holder or the properties make more money? Which will be good for the sustainability of the sport in the long term.
Well, I mean, I think it's like the advertising proposition as a whole is about interrupting your experience, isn't it? I mean, that is if you look at the difference between sponsorship, which is organic, it's part of the experience. The more additive, the better from a brand's point of view. Whereas, an advert interrupts your experience in order to bring you a message, and they're different properties and often used very well in tandem. I guess the visceral reaction is, this is interrupting my pure, beautiful product.
Yeah.
But obviously the economics always come to play and sports organizations, broadcasters need to drive revenue. And actually, I thought that was a very beautifully done.
Tastefully done, yeah.
Yeah, and didn't in any way detract from my personal experience. But then, I have also the lens of trying to understand the commercials behind it. So perhaps I'm not the average fan in that sense.
But then actually to that point, I mean, digital, we obviously talk about digital and we think about digital as like mobile web, an app, but connected devices are a big part of it. Now, these ads actually can be personalized, can be emotion-based. I mean, to your point before about connecting those moments and fan engagement, fan reactions to brands, there is an opportunity where some of those ads can be not just a generic message being broadcasted to the entire audience. It can be tailored to the moment. It can be tailored.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's this is, I think, the big sort of existential question around the relationship with brands, because on the one hand, you've got a very traditional sponsorship model, global sponsorship revenues are not growing. More and more, they're going to the top, to the top tier rights holders. The budgets are moving further in that direction, which obviously is creating a challenge below that. But on the other side, you've got advertising where brands are buying audiences and are less bothered, often less bothered about what content is associated with those audiences. They're buying the audience.
Yeah.
And actually, there's something in between those things, a hybrid. If you think about the sort of hallmarks of sponsorship, it's that organic, additive, the opportunity for a brand to be part of an experience when the audience is at their most passionate. That is an unbelievable proposition.
Yeah.
And it should be growing very quickly. But the challenges, the barriers to it are the fact that there is no attribution. It was more difficult to find attribution. It's very difficult to compare that attribution with other forms of brand spend. So I think that there is a hybrid model combining ultimately content assets with advertising assets to maximize a return, which should be a super premium proposition. So it sort of benefits from all the sort of really important premium elements of sponsorship, which are sort of, piggybacking on the trust that exists between the sport, the player, and the audience. With the attribution model of advertising, and whether you're trying to branded content as an awareness play and then overlaid with either interactions with the audience using LiveLike or adverts, pure play adverts, which are designed to supplement your content interaction strategy.
Brand marketing versus performance marketing per se.
But these things are going to come together, and this sort of new world of sponsorship, in my view, will grow exponentially because it's a hell of a proposition.
Are you seeing rights holders talk like this? Are you seeing that in the boardrooms that you're part of?
So what I'm seeing is the conversation. So the challenge is sponsorship's not growing, or sort of long-term brand awareness budgets are not growing in real terms. Whereas performance budgets are growing quickly.
And performance budgets would be like social media ads or YouTube ads and
buying
stuff like
audiences versus buying content. And I think
that's a good way to put it. Okay.
And so the reality is, if you were to create a more diverse set of assets and present them as a media plan, that gives you an opportunity to do what all sports are looking to do, which is open up new budget areas within brands. So typically speaking, a sponsorship budget will be, if you're a global consumer brand, a sponsorship will be 10-12% of your total spend. And, that's a small budget pool.
Interesting. Okay.
That's a small budget pool. The media budgets are much, much bigger. So if you're able to, and if you look at what Relevant are doing with the Champions League model, they're very successfully looking for new budget pools within those same brands. And that's
so sponsorship versus media spend. Sponsorship would be putting your logo on the side panels or LED boards or jersey patches versus media budgets being ads on TV or ads on Facebook and YouTube, buying audiences.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And, if you are to create a model which evolves, then that is, that evolves that, brings the best of both worlds. Then, the opportunity is exponential.
One of the things that I found is and this is to our previous point about, staying power and how long it takes, everything makes sense. And yet if the number on a percentage basis is not big enough, this might move the needle by 5 or 10% in the near term. It might be much more in the long term. I need to focus on the 90%. And I find it hard to get through to people because it's sort of everything innovation it's too small for now. Let's worry about it later. Let's focus on the bigger picture. And I feel like when you have that sort of mindset, years go by. And all the compounding effects that could have been had during that time, you've lost those. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, but I think that's missing the point, isn't it? I mean, so if you put the fan at the center of the equation, you start with what, your entire focus should be on how can I service this audience in the best possible way, as diversely as possible for the different cohorts. And if you start with that, then you build the proposition, the economics behind it. And so, starting with a really great content experience, integrating the brand into that experience, that may not, they obviously achieve scale through your TV and your various digital channels, but you can also supplement that. If you've got your access to first-party data or zero-party data even, you can use that data, as an arbitrage, ultimately to grow scale on top of this much more high premium proposition at the center of it. So all of these things should grow, and you should use them in combination to grow each other. And that's that's what we're saying is and it's an integrated media plan which combines content and advertising assets.
That integration is actually such a critical part, because I feel like a lot of people do it as either or. And I think, to me, if someone tells me what is the power of AI or the power of personalization, I was like, to me, orchestrating multiple workflows at once is probably what was the missing element before, because it was either or, and it doesn't have to be. You can do all of it at once at this point in time, because you can have AI run those workflows. You don't need to have a full department doing 5 things, half the department does this, half the department does that. No, actually, you can do so much more together at this point in time. And frankly, I think digital moving into CTV probably has been like the biggest catalyst, because now even the big screen consumption is not just linear anymore. It is digital. And then you're leaving money on the table by taking a pure broadcast one-to-many approach on something that is inherently meant to be a one-to-one experience.
Absolutely. And then there's the first screen versus second screen and how you make them complementary. And it's all, so, I mean, the channel becomes less important, doesn't it? It's how you combine the audience information that you garner with the content, and you talk about the AI enabling you ultimately to serve the individual versus the cohort. That's because if you're talking about marketing automation, typically you're looking at cohorts. Whereas what you're talking about there is one-to-one. You talking directly to one person.
Couldn't agree more. I think that distinction between cohorts and personal and one-to-one. I mean, even right now, I think the one-to-one promise is very powerful. But even right now, when LiveLike, when we talk about the Genie and what the Genie is capable of, I actually am talking to people about still starting with cohorts, because even that's not happening yet. And cohorts can be on many different attributes, right? You might have cohorts based on location. You can have cohorts based on behavioral data that you're capturing in the FDP, or all fans that are engaging more during a comeback is one cohort. All fans that are fair weather fans is another cohort. Whatever it is, you can have cohorts of different natures. That one-to-one, and frankly, with AI, I think the part that I am still not sure yet, and this is an internal conversation as well, is actually how the tokenomics are going to work when you try to do it on a one-to-one level, because that's the one thing that the industry hasn't necessarily, any industry hasn't really got a full grasp on, is how the economics are going to work when you start using AI for one-to-one personalization. And so I'm like, let's start crawl, walk, run. Let's start with cohorts. Let's start personalizing for certain specific cohorts, but let's create those cohorts on the fly. They don't have to be predefined cohorts.
But the way I view that is quite simple, really. You're starting in most cases with a 0. And that's the reality.
There's a lot of room for growth.
There's a lot of room for growth. And then, what we're basically saying is putting the fan at the center of the proposition. By servicing that fan at the cohort level, we're going to improve the experience for the fan and therefore the engagement levels. That's going to drive up the price of the inventory you create on the back of it, because all of the fundamentals are evident. If you're then taking it to the next level and saying, okay, I'm going to super serve you using AI to the individual, you're going to drive up that engagement further, and therefore the value. So it's like it's all boils down to how well are you servicing the needs of the individual, and that's the and a lot of that is obviously still a work in progress. But we're starting from ground zero.
But in that sense, I guess my next question then would be, like, based on all the data that the organizations are collecting, what do you think are the most common mistakes that you think the teams and properties out there are doing despite having the data?
Well, it goes back to these silos. Very few organizations have a true single view of their fan base. And that is the starting point of all the things we're talking about here. And, some of that's functional. So in the US, the reasons for silos are different to Europe, in the fact that, there is a dedicated ticket sales team who, have a specific focus on ticket sales, and they have a data that services their needs. And, that the economic decision is made specifically for that use case. And I think that is something that's going to take a longer chain, and also the relationship between the league and what the league owns is different to what the leagues own in the European market. So some of the silos are by design. I would argue that that's a mistake. But they
didn't have the use case in the past to connect the data. I think now there are use cases out there.
Exactly. And our view is behavioral data is important for all of these use cases.
Absolutely.
So having a repository which enables you to combine more traditional transactional data feeds, which, by the way, very few people have conquered on just in that one side, in one use case, on top of having this reaction to experiences and content, you can that your potential use cases and therefore economic opportunities are so much greater.
What do you think it looks like when someone does get it right?
Massive growth. I think that's what's exciting for me, is the fact that the balance sheet, the whole original idea that we're creating a new balance sheet that becomes a reality. And that balance sheet is not just about lifetime value. It's about lifetime value plus the opportunity for brands to invest in that person over the period of their fandom. So it's a combined balance sheet proposition. And our view, as I said before, is that the brand partnerships is much bigger opportunity than the direct fan revenue opportunity.
And in that case, I mean, that's, I suppose, lends itself to what Cortex is doing, right? Which is essentially built around the premise of every fan interaction being a monetizable, trackable asset.
Exactly.
In practice, when you've worked with clients who have done it right, what are some of the use cases that, some example of use cases that might have enabled the partners to have?
So, I mean, just things like, starting with the direct fan revenues, moving from, undersold events to sold out events in advance before the competing teams are known, which is, it's a very significant shift.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think what we're seeing on the brand spend side is brands are demanding more campaigns-based information. So ultimately, you have the way that brands buy at the moment. You've got obviously the partnerships team, and then you've got the activations that sit in the media media teams. I think we're seeing the sort of genesis of more coordination between those two things. And ultimately the goal of the rights order is to capture as much of that activation budget as possible. And we think that that's obviously very achievable.
If you don't mind, maybe walking us through like a specific example, like an end-to-end journey from a fan taking an action to an organization acting on it. How would that look like?
Well, so it goes back to how you use different combinations of assets together. So ultimately, if you take a poll, it starts with a call to action, and that call to action could be on the big screen in the stadium.
Yeah,
it could be on the LED. Vote now for your man of the match. You've got a 6-minute window at the end of the game. It could be via social channels. It could be on the homepage of your website. The call to action comes up, and that's an asset in its own right. Then you've got the return path, which is the voting mechanic. And if you've got a video that you're voting, you could be voting within the context of the video, or you could have a completely separate mechanic. You're measuring that in a different way to the call to action. You're obviously number of votes ultimately. And then you've got the final piece, which is the results of the poll, which could be a real-time asset. Again, published on all those different channels. And so these are all different assets working together to create a proposition. You might be measuring those assets for different campaign objectives. Some awareness, some return on investment, etc. So you can then overlay it with an ad. You can retarget that. You can send your first-party data from your fan data platform to the advertising tools to retarget the fans and ultimately drive people back into to registering into your fan data platform. So ultimately what you're doing is building a combination of different content assets overlaid with advertising assets, which is at the same time, each of those has an economic value, but then you're also driving the funnel as well and growing your core business, your core assets. So that's kind of how these things, in a very simplistic view work together.
What would you say to an organization that's treating fan engagement, more as a marketing add-on rather than a commercial strategy?
So a sort of, I guess, a continuation of the silo discussion in a way. I think the best outcomes are always where at the center of your approach is a clear purpose and a clear understanding of what you're trying to do with your target audiences. And obviously everyone being on the same page achieves great results. And we've got, some really great customers where we've done some incredibly exciting things to achieve genuine returns.
Yeah.
Equally, if there is a sort of an individual marketing activation at the other end of the spectrum, they can work to specific as long as you're clear again on the purpose. But generally speaking, joining everything together creates far more opportunity than having everything in separate areas. And that's I think that's true of many businesses, not just.
No, I agree with that as well. I mean, one of the things that I've always thought about, and I talk about this with LiveLike, our first iteration, which was a virtual reality industry, it was almost like, we were innovating, we were ahead of the market. I think we're still ahead of the curve, frankly. But it also, I felt personally, in hindsight, it was a problem looking for a solution, or a solution looking for a problem, rather. But that's true for every innovative business in a way, because you're going to your partners and trying to tell them you should do this without them recognizing that is an inherent challenge or a problem that they have. In a B2B industry, obviously we have dealt a lot on the B2B side. How do you build a business around that?
So I think it's a really great question. And it sort of it's an uncomfortable one because we've been in the same situation really, in the fact that the genesis of the vision at InCrowd started out as a mobile app, because our view was, if you're helping your customer in the pocket of the fan, then that's the ultimate vehicle for personalization. And ultimately, the view has changed. So, it's actually more about what you understand about your customer and the content how flexible you are in creating the content to serve the needs of the customer. That's important.
I'm sure there are many different answers to this question, the next question that I'm going to ask you, but if you had to pick one thing, which is like the industry's collective blind spot right now, questions that the organization should be asking, but they aren't, what would you say it is?
I mean, I think it goes back to, what type of organization are we? Because, at the club level, clubs or teams are consumer-facing businesses, and that is in the DNA to a certain extent. And helping evolve that digitally is obviously a big opportunity. At the league level, typically they're more B2B type organizations, but there is a huge B2C opportunity, and that is a bigger DNA shift. So
interesting.
And
everyone's becoming a media organization at this point, and every media company is trying to become
ultimately an engagement proposition. And linear media businesses are wanting to understand audience reaction to pieces of content, and both directly and as well as via their digital channels. And that makes sense. But I think a lot of people have a lot of the direction has been, well, if we're going to be a consumer business, that means we're a television provider via digital channels, and I think that to me is a much more difficult question, because that is these broadcasters are very, very sophisticated consumer marketing businesses, and ultimately pay handsomely for their role in the ecosystem. Being a consumer business can mean something very much more diverse and interesting, which is a value add, and serves a purpose of being a sports organization without being a conflict to the broadcast ecosystem. So yeah, I think understanding the purpose of the organization, I think is still an opportunity in most cases.
The more organizations think of themselves as consumer-facing organizations, it's better for both of us, because then you have to start thinking about how do you cater to that consumer. That's when data becomes relevant. That's when loyalty, fandom, community becomes relevant. Which is why, when my investors ask me, like, what's your target market or ICP? And I'm like, there's media, there's broadcasters, because all broadcasters are trying to also not just broadcast through cable anymore. They're going direct to consumer. Digital properties, sports teams and leagues are trying to do the same thing. So in a way, I personally think our market has actually expanded quite significantly, because everyone needs those services now, not just a handful of customers in the ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately there's, the like, sharing and following is, these are digitizations of behaviors that existed before. And those behaviors really were designed around live entertainment, of which sport is king. So or king or queen.
David Stern's words. That reminds me of David Stern. He used to always say that.
Yeah. No harm in echoing the great man.
Yeah. All right. I think this is one thing that, I've always admired, or rather looked up to, in terms of the amount of time you spent in two very different sports, in the sense of cricket and rugby. You spent a lot of time with cricket and rugby, and yet Opta was a soccer first or football first proposition. Very different sports in terms of their culture, in terms of different commercialization, like the maturity that they have in terms of commercialization, and probably very different relationships with data. Are there any parallels or obvious differences that you can tell us about?
In terms of the storytelling?
Could be anything between two, highly popular sports, global sports, but in terms of how they go about doing things. I mean, if you think about NFL, NBA, these American sports, they're all very, yes, they're trying to go international, but primarily they're American, they're catering to an American audience.
Yeah.
Formula One, very global sport. And yet one of my biggest frustrations probably is that I'm getting Sky's feed sitting in India and the US talking about Lewis Hamilton, when we clearly know Max Verstappen is the GOAT.
No comment. But obviously, great players excel, and going back to the sort of fundamental economics, T20 is a different order of magnitude to the longer formats. And that's driven by India, and that's what audiences demand.
Yeah.
So, you have to say that, the sport has listened to the audience and has created a proposition that has reached a much bigger audience than the Red Bull format has reached.
It's actually interesting. I was thinking about the people who created Lalit Modi and all, the ones who created IPL. I wonder if at the time, you're phrasing it as the audience has demanded, but in a way it was a solution looking for. I don't think I don't think there were people clamoring for short form cricket.
But the reality is, we're always on the edge.
Yeah. On that note, I think we've obviously exceeded our time by a lot. People are looking at us saying we need to go home. But thank you for being on the podcast, Aidan. This was fascinating. I think we could have gone much longer, but this was great.
Thank you very much, and it's always fun to chat with you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening to Future of Fandom. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and follow LiveLike on LinkedIn for more conversations with the people shaping what's next in the world of sports and media. Until next time, keep building for fans, not just users.